Hi, everybody. I wanted to go ahead and start off chapter 7 with some slides. And these are actually from the cdc.gov, the Center for Disease Control. And they're basically looking at the historical view of obesity trends among US adults starting with 1985. And it goes up till 2010, I believe, is the last year. And then it actually stops after that because they collected data after that time until now, 2020, with a different method. So you cannot compare the maps after that. But I wanted to show you from 1985 to 2010, just so you can see historically where we were with obesity trends up until kind of where we are more recently. So if you're looking at this map, you'll notice that all the states that are white at this point have no data. The states that are light blue, less than 10% of the population is considered to be either overweight or obese, and 10 to 14% of the population is either overweight or obese if it's the darker blue states. Okay, so I'm going to go year by year just so you can get a feel for how we're doing with our obesity trends. And just so you guys know, the way they collected this data, it's all done off of a person's body mass index, which, as you know from doing your obesity research, is basically a height weight calculation where it puts you in the population in different obesity categories. All right, so this is 1985, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91. We have a new category of 15 to 19%, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97. New category of greater than or equal to 20% of the population, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. New category 25%, 02, 03, 04, 05. New category 30%, 06, 07, 08, 09, 2010. And if you were to continue looking beyond this year and go up till where we are now, it looks very similar in terms of how the states are laid out. You'll notice that down here in the South, like where Texas is and Louisiana, Alabama, they're all in the higher category in terms of the obesity trends. Whereas on the West Coast, it does look pretty similar as in this picture. About 20% of the population is considered to be overweight or obese. You'll notice that the one state, and I'll show you here just looking back one year, that is, I like to say, that went over on the dark side, is Colorado, which is interesting because if you've ever been to Colorado, they're very health minded over there. And so much so, in fact, that when they do national studies like this in other areas besides obesity trends, they've found that Colorado is considered to be one of the healthiest states in the United States for air quality, environmental quality, access to healthy foods, access to physical activity. So there's a bunch of different categories in terms of why it's considered to be the healthiest state, which is interesting, and that it also shows that it has the lower rates of obesity trends. And it's kind of on the cusp because if you look at the years, even going backward and going forward, it goes back and forth several times. So it's right on the cusp of being within two different categories. So I wanted to put this out here first because it gets us all to thinking. I'm sure some of you, as you're watching this, were feeling a little shocked in terms of, oh my gosh, this is crazy, and how bad it's become with our obesity epidemic here in the United States. And there's so many different reasons why. I would challenge you guys to think of those reasons. A lot of times people will say that technology has a lot to do with it. We're all sitting behind a desk on a computer, and also the fact that we have so many fast food locations available to us might be another reason. Convenience food, lack of time that we all just have nowadays. So there's a few different reasons. Lack of physical activity that has changed drastically over the years. Kids not getting outside anymore and playing like they used to. Those could all be reasons contributing to the obesity epidemic. So just something to think about as we're moving forward here with our presentation this week on obesity. Now, normally in the classroom, we would be covering chapter 7 on the first day, and then the second day, we would be doing our group presentations. But of course, with our current situation, we are going to forego that for this week, and for the next day following this presentation, we're going to be watching Super Size Me and answering some questions. So that'll be fun. In fact, that movie, if you've never seen it before, I know it's a little dated now, but it still has so much great information in there, and it just kind of gets us thinking about just our food choices that we have throughout the day. So we're going to do that this week, and I think it'll be great. It'll cover obesity in a nutshell, and also give us a really good idea of why obesity even exists in this country. All right, so chapter 7, energy balance and weight control. I highly, highly recommend that you guys have something to take notes with as we move forward, just like we would in the classroom. And obviously, we're not going to be doing questions and answers, but if you guys have any questions after viewing this presentation, please do not hesitate to either contact me directly, or I am going to have a discussion board set up just for questions and answers, so we can all see each other's questions and answers. And feel free to chime in if you know the answer to the question, because oftentimes our peers in the classroom create that conversation, and I think that would be really great. So, all right, first slide, energy balance and weight control. I do want you guys to be familiar with how many people have this obesity problem. And if you look at the statistics here, about 1 billion people worldwide are considered to be overweight or obese. Now, again, this is all categorized based on the body mass index calculation that we were just referring to. And a lot of it has to do with, unfortunately, us sharing our diet, our convenience diet, our westernized diet with the world. And, years ago, United States was number one in obesity efforts. And, we have to be number one in everything. But now we're seeing these problems throughout the world, which is scary. So, and again, fast food has a lot to do with that. Our fast food usually, or when I say fast food, I really mean westernized diets, characterized by high saturated fat, high sugar diets, high sodium, trans fat could also be added on here. And because of that, it's directly correlated with obesity risk. Okay, and one thing we need to understand is one of the big questions, and just so you guys can kind of put this into perspective, when I was getting my public health degree, my graduate degree, one of the topics that I focused on throughout the whole time that I was getting that was childhood obesity. It just was so fascinating to me. It's such a fascinating topic because it is not simple at all. It is very, very complicated when it comes to how you should go about trying to treat this epidemic that we have going on. And it's very, very confusing, and it's the hugest challenge that I think our country has faced in terms of health problems over the years, obviously, chronic health problems, because obesity is multi-leveled when it comes to the diseases that it causes, and also how you would try to create a healthier environment is a very collective effort type of remedy. So we know through studies that government, food industry, health professionals, different communities on the local levels really need to come together and create that cohesiveness for how to move forward and combat this issue. So we looked at the maps already. Again, you can go on cdc.gov if you want to show anybody that. It's kind of interesting. Okay, I do want you to know the current number of people in the United States that are considered to be either overweight or obese. And if you look down at the bottom here on the slide, you'll notice that this is 2009, 2010. That's the number we're going to go off of because that is considered to be the current number for how many people have this issue. So it's 68.8%, also 69%. It's very close to 69. That's kind of the magic number that we're going to use for our class. Now, when you guys go on your own and do your own research for your obesity research project, you'll notice that depending on where you look, you might get different facts and figures, but it's going to be all around 69% or so. That's currently where we are. Now, that's a lot of people if you think about it. I mean, almost 70% of the people in the United States are considered to be overweight or obese. And I want us to move away from the thinking of that it's just a physical problem, because it is so much more beyond that. In fact, one of the things we'll learn about in this chapter, but also we talk about it in the eating disorder chapter coming up, is that it makes no difference what somebody looks like on the outside. It is what is internally happening on the inside with our health. And you guys know from doing your research, type 2 diabetes, um, heart disease, liver and gallbladder disease, osteoarthritis, I mean, mental issues, the list goes on. And actually, on the CDC website, there's a huge list of problems that it goes along with. Okay, let's talk about the issue of energy balance. I do want you to know what this means. This is definitely a really important topic to understand. So when we talk about energy balance, we're talking about basically the energy in versus energy out. And it all depends on basically how active we are and how much food we're consuming in terms of our calories. So when we are in energy balance, you will notice that, let me see if I can get my little pointer here. So that if we are intaking 3,000 kcals per day, and we are also outputting about 3,000 kcals per day, there will be no change in our weight. This is all theoretically speaking, okay? This is just talking about calories. Calories in equals calories out, which then means we're in energy balance. So that is what energy balance is. Basically, how much you're eating, how much you're outputting, and then whether your weight is changing or not. So there's no change in weight, energy balance. Okay, now compare that with positive energy balance. Positive energy balance, I want you to understand this, basically means you're intaking more than what you're expending. So 4,000 calories, if you're consuming on an average of 4,000 calories per day, and you're not doing a lot of exercise to burn off those calories, and you're only burning off 2,000 calories per day, you over time are going to have an increase in weight. And that is considered to be positive energy balance. I want you to think the word positive does not mean happy in this sense. It means positive in terms of being like going forward, more in this sense. Okay, so energy in is greater than energy out. Now, there are certain times in our lives where this happens naturally. Positive energy balance can happen naturally. Let's say if we are, first of all, if we're just trying to gain weight, say we're underweight and we're trying to gain weight to be at a healthy weight. It could also happen if we are just not exercising, and maybe we were sick or something and we're not exercising, or we got injured and we're still consuming the same amount of calories that we would normally consume, but we're not moving, around too much to burn off those calories. Another time would be when we're pregnant. When women become pregnant, they are in positive energy balance, and rightfully so, because they are growing another human being inside them. Another time, you guys have all been through it already, is you had positive energy balance through your childhood and adolescent years. Those are the growing years. So you want to have more calories in versus what you're expending, because you want to grow and thrive and gain a little weight slowly over a period of time. So that would all be considered positive energy balance. Negative energy balance, I want you to know what this is. Negative energy balance is basically the opposite. So however much you're intaking is going to be less than what you're outputting. So in this example, this man here is consuming less calories than what he's burning. So it looks like he's skiing here and burning 3,000 calories per day. And because of that, he has a decrease in weight. So he's losing weight. So this is considered negative energy balance. And a natural time that this would happen in our life would be if we are, again, trying to lose weight. So maybe we are overweight and not feeling good and have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. We want to be, eating healthfully, consuming less calories than what we normally were consuming, losing weight, getting healthy, and that would be considered negative energy balance. Another time where this happens naturally in our life would be towards the end of our life cycle. So typically, if you've ever known any elderly people, they typically have not as big of an appetite towards the end of their life, and they gradually lose weight. And that would also be considered a time in your life where you're having negative energy balance. So energy in is less than energy out. So, when you look at the amount of calories that it requires to gain 1 pound of fat, it's actually quite a bit. 3,500 kcals is equal to 1 pound of fat. Now, if you could look at this, you could look at this in two different ways. It seems easy to gain that pound of fat. It seems hard to burn off that pound of fat, right? If you're like running on the treadmill, that's a lot of running to burn off 3,500 calories. But it is pretty easy to consume that. I mean, you can go through In-N-Out and probably consume that much in a meal if you really wanted to. So it's easy to eat that. Now, it just depends on kind of how you look at it. And the reason why, the average adult is 8 pounds heavier than just 10 years ago, this kind of goes back to our maps that we looked at in the beginning. The amount of cheap food that we have here is crazy. And think about that in terms of fast food. So we go through the drive-through, and on the dollar menu, that's where all those energy dense foods are that are not really considered to be, they're energy dense, but they're not considered to be nutrient dense all the time. So they have a lot of calories associated with them, and they're cheap, so they fill us up, but they're not really providing our body with nutrition. The food availability that we have, again, think fast food again, vending machines. Vending machines are all over the place. Even, if you think about our school on campus, we have vending machines all over the place. And typically, if you think about the food that's in vending machines, it's not healthy, nutrient-dense food. It's usually loaded with like chips and, sodas and snack type foods. There's lots of convenience food, obviously, like we talked about, fast foods, drive-up windows. Everything is all about convenience now because we're all so busy and crazy with our lives. Social gatherings, obviously, and then supersized portions. We'll actually talk about this when you watch the movie, the documentary Supersize Me. How things have changed over the years. It's pretty crazy how everything has become supersized, and more is better here in the United States. All right, there's basically 3 different ways, and I want you guys to know this. Please jot this down. 3 different ways that you are utilizing calories in your body. The first one is called basal metabolism. Now, basal metabolism is basically our metabolism. It is the minimal amount of calories the body uses to support itself in a fasting state when resting and awake in warm, quiet environment. So what this all means is basically you can monitor this and you can gauge this while you're sleeping. You can figure out what your basal metabolism is if you were to do this like on a machine type of situation. But your metabolism, a lot of people think, oh, it's burning calories. Yes, that's what it is, but it's not so much burning calories. It's utilizing the calories from your food that you're consuming and creating that caloric need for the things that you need that you don't need physical activity for. So for example, I'm trying to say that it's all the involuntary type of bodily functions that are happening in your system. So your basal metabolism is in charge of maintaining your heartbeat, maintaining your breathing or your respiration, maintaining your body temperature, your brain working, your brain thinking, that type of stuff. That is all considered to be under the basal metabolism umbrella. And out of all the caloric needs that we're going to talk about, it's the highest. It's about 60 to 75% of our total energy needs is dedicated towards our basal metabolism. And everyone's metabolism is completely different, as you probably know. A lot of it is dependent on either genetics or even more importantly, how much physical activity you're doing. So did you know that the more physical activity that you do during the day, the higher your basal metabolism is? You basically are going to be burning more calories in a resting state. This is aside from physical activity calories. You're going to be burning more calories in a resting state than you would be if you did not do activity during the day. So that's really important to understand that someone who is physically active, even when at rest, they are burning more calories through the day than someone who is not. because their basal metabolism is working at a faster rate. So that's why there's that range there of 60 to 75%, because everybody's is different. Okay, so that's the first one. These are all the factors that influence basal metabolism. Like I mentioned, physical activity is one of them, but also these others. So we have body surface area, lean body mass, gender, body temperature, your thyroid, how your thyroid is functioning, stress. Are you having stress in your life? Sometimes having more stress will go either way. It could either rev up your metabolism, or it could either have the opposite effect of slowing it down. How old you are, typically the older you are, the slower your basal metabolism is. How many calories you're intaking. Also, the type of food that you're consuming will have a lot to do with influencing your basal metabolism. If you're having more unprocessed foods, your metabolism is going to work more efficiently than if you're having like a bunch of sugar and sodium and things that slow your body down. Pregnancy obviously is going to affect your basal metabolism. The use of caffeine and tobacco, these are two chemical substances, but they also will rev up your metabolism. That's why somebody who typically is like a smoker and they stop smoking may end up gaining weight. I don't know if you know anybody like that, but what's happened is their body has become accustomed to the tobacco, and your basal metabolism gets affected when you stop doing that. I do not, let me be clear about this, that tobacco is not healthy. It's not something that you want to start doing to rev up your basal metabolism. There are other healthier ways to do that. That's just the book is giving you an example of how other factors can influence basal metabolism. The number one thing you can do to rev it up is physical activity. The more physical activity you have in your life, the more energy you're going to burn, basically. It makes sense. You're going to create a need for more calories to be used for your basal metabolism. In this first bullet point, increases energy expenditure by as much as 15 to 35% beyond basal metabolism. So it says the lack of activity is a major cause of obesity. Yes, we know that for sure. So this alone can be a big factor for influencing your basal metabolism. And then the last one is called thermic effect of food, also called thermogenesis. You may have heard that word before. It's basically the amount of energy used for the digestion and absorption process of your food. So the digestion process alone creates a need for calories. You may have heard of something called negative calorie foods. These are foods that require more digestive effort than the food itself. Celery is the classic example, that it creates a need for more calories to digest the celery than what the celery actually contains. So this is a great example of how the thermic effect of food creates that need for calories consumed. So it's really interesting. And also there's basically a level here of how many calories are needed to digest food. So it's actually the highest for protein, then carbs, and then fat. It requires the least amount of calories to digest fat, which is interesting. So protein is the most. That's why people like to have a lot of protein in their diet throughout the day, just to create that calorie need and utilize it properly. All right, so what is a healthy body weight? This is like the big question that everybody wants answered. And everybody's different. That's the thing, is there's not one specific way to answer this question. And I think a lot of people go to the classic, oh, how much do you weigh? And going on a scale. And that's just really one piece of the puzzle. I love the fact that they have, the body mass index, but I don't think it's everything. So take that with, just a little bit of information, because there's so many other things to look at. This slide right here is important to know for your personal information. These are basically the main indicators of an unhealthy weight. So, and if you look at it, it really has to do with, going to the doctor and get checked. It really has nothing to do with stepping on a scale. So hypertension? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you have elevated bad cholesterol? This is, remember, the LDL, low density lipoprotein cholesterol. Do you have a family history of disease in your family? That's going to indicate whether you have an unhealthy weight status. Do you have a pattern of upper body fat distribution? We'll talk about that in a second, because where you store your fat can actually indicate whether you are healthy or not. And then the last one is, do you have elevated blood glucose, which can be an indicator for diabetes, as we know. So those are more important to look at more than anything else, looking at your blood basically and figuring out what's your cholesterol levels. These are all the problems that are associated with having too much excess body fat. And there's so many. This is just a small snapshot. This is exactly what you guys are going to be presenting on at the end of the semester. Is how is obesity related to all these different problems? I mean, the list just goes on and on. And again, this is a small list, because what happens when you have too much body fat, it will affect your hormone levels in your body, and it creates all kinds of bad functions in your body because of that. Here is the actual body mass index calculator that you can punch in, to your calculator, or they have apps that you can punch this information in. You don't need to memorize this. Don't feel like you need to jot it down. It basically was created by a mathematician years ago. And what it does is it puts people into categories. I do want you guys to be familiar with the specific category of healthy weight. So this is all based on that calculation, and we know by looking at a mass group of people that for the most part, that's really key, for the most part, most people are going to be in the correct category. Not everybody, because everybody has different weight distribution on their body in terms of fat mass versus muscle mass. But we know for the most part that most people are going to be in the correct category. So what it is if you have a body mass index of 18.5 or below, you're considered to be underweight. 18.5 to 24.9 is considered to be a healthy weight. You're overweight if you're 25 to 29.9. Obese is 30 to 39.9. And severely or even morbidly obese, it's sometimes called, is greater than 40. And so the one that I really want you to memorize is this one, the healthy weight, 18.5 to 24.9, because that one is kind of the midpoint in terms of if it's below that, it's underweight. If it's above that, it's overweight. So if you know that range, I think that would be good to know, not only for this class, but just for your own information as you move forward. The book gives you these naked body pictures, which, that's fine. But I kind of look at this and I think, everybody has different shapes and different sizes. And I don't think that's a really good thing to look at, because we all come in different sizes and shapes, and, we all look different. So I don't want you guys looking at that picture. So here's also a height weight table, again, done off the body mass index. If you guys could take a moment and find your height in feet and inches over here on this left-hand column, and then match it up with about where your weight is on this top row right here. So for example, let's say you're 5'10" and you weigh about 170 pounds. You would be right here on 26, which is the body mass index of 26 is considered to be in the overweight category. Anything that's blue is overweight. Anything that's green is healthy weight. Anything that's pink is obese. And if it's white, that's underweight. It's not listed down here. So take a moment and look at that, and you can see where you are. Now, if we were in class, I would ask you guys, do you think that you're in the correct weight group? And most of the time, most people say, yeah, I think I am. And then I have a handful of students that will raise their hand and say, you know what? No way. I am not in the obese category. I know I'm not. I work out all the time. I'm really healthy. I lift weights. I do this and that. And you're probably right. You're probably, according to this, in the obese category, but according to your blood levels, you're probably healthy and in a healthy weight range. So you can't really look at this totally. It's just one piece of the puzzle. There's so many other things to look at. Like we said, looking at your cholesterol levels, looking at your blood. Also, looking at your body fat percentage is really important to take into consideration. So these are the acceptable amount of body fat percentages. For women, it's 16 to 30%. For men, it's 11 to 20. If you are considered to be in kind of the increased risk group, it would be in this. So for women, if you're over 37% body fat, that's when the little red flag goes up. For men, if you're over 24% body fat, again, and this is all done off of statistics and data over the years. So this is not just a random number that they're shooting out at us. This is over years of studying and looking at patterns and figuring out, when you're looking at mass groups of people and we correlate it to a disease, how much body fat percentage is that now is considered to be healthy versus not healthy. So that's where that comes in. Now, if you're wondering, how do you even find out your body fat percentage? Some of you have probably done it before. There's different ways. This way used to be considered the most accurate way out of all of them, underwater weighing. But the problem with this is that it basically is expensive to do. It's hard to find a place that does this unless you're working in like a kinesiology lab or something like that that does this on a regular basis. So most people don't get their body fat percentage measured by doing the underwater weighing technique, but this is one way of doing it. Basically what happens is your fat weight is different in water than it is on land, and they do a calculation to figure that out. And it's considered to be pretty accurate. But there's another way I'll show you here in a second, that's even more accurate. The bod pod. So this is interesting. I love this picture of this lady. She's like super happy in there. And what it does is it's air displacement. So there's a calculation here also. You sit in there and it determines the body volume and the air displaced in a sealed chamber. And you do this little calculation and you figure out what your body fat percentage is. Again, this is usually not done. It's expensive to get it done. You have to go to a special lab to figure this out. Most people don't do this method. This is probably one of the more common methods to figure out your body fat percentage. It's not considered to be the most accurate though, unfortunately, but it's going to give you a good range of kind of where you are. And most people have gotten this done maybe at the gym, or maybe even growing up if you had PE class. I know like at my son's middle school, they do this as part of like their health assessment, where you get this little caliper and you do it on 3 different parts of the body, typically on the back of the arm, on the thigh, on your abdomen, or even on your back. It depends on who does it, but there's usually 3 different places that they'll do it, and they take an average of the measurements of looking at the body fat percentage. So this is the skin fold thickness test. This one is also a more common one where you may have seen this before on they have it on scales now. It's like a body fat percentage, and also you can weigh yourself at the same time. And it's called bioelectrical impedance. And you hold on to, or you put your feet on these little metal parts there, and it basically gives you there's a device that measures resistance to the flow of a low energy electrical current through the body. So it basically gives you a percentage of the fat based on how much water content you have going through your lean tissue versus your fat tissue. And then there's a calculation involved in there. Okay, and then not really considered to be the most accurate, but again, I would place it in the same category as the skin fold test. This one is considered to be the most accurate, this last one here. It's called dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, and it's a full body X-ray scan. So this is the one that's best because it looks at 3 different things. It looks at fat tissue, lean tissue, and bone mass, and basically does a calculation dependent on all 3 of those things. Okay, what I do want you to know, this is important to know, is the body fat distribution. And there's 2 different names for this. Technically speaking, this is called android obesity. And android obesity is where you have, I know it sounds funny, an apple-shaped body. It's compared to fruit. Now, there's also something called gynoid obesity, and this is the pear-shaped body. It kind of looks like a pear. And out of the two here, the apple-shaped body, and I just want you to know apple-shaped or pear-shaped. Don't be concerned with the technical name because you're not, I think going on in your years, you're probably not going to remember android and gynoid, but you will remember apple and pear. So if you're apple-shaped body, apple-shaped bodies are more at increased risk for disease. And you may have seen this when you're doing your obesity research because this is actually an important concept. Because when you're storing your fat in your abdomen area here, like think about where all your important organs are, your liver and your gallbladder and your intestines and your stomach and everything is right here, your kidneys. And so when you're putting extra pressure on all those organs, that is going to create a big problem for all the different systems in your body, and put you at increased risk for disease. So in particular, increased risk for chronic diseases such as hypertension, coronary artery disease, type 2 diabetes, and so on. Even cancers, they've related it to cancers. So this is kind of an interesting fun fact. In Japan, I believe, is one of the only countries, if not the only country, that part of their regular physical exam that they have with their patients is they take a waist circumference measurement. Now, they don't typically do that here in the United States, but that's part of the normal procedure over there in Japan. And Japan, another fun fact, is considered to be the healthiest country in the whole world due to their lifestyle, due to their diet that they have. They have a lot of rice and fish and vegetables. So it's a lot different over there than it is here in the United States. So a couple different little fun facts there. And then if you're pear-shaped body, you're actually at lower risk for these different issues here. Not that it's considered to be healthy, but if you had to pick between the two shapes, this shape, the pear shape, is actually healthier to have than the apple-shaped body. So, and a lot of that has to do with genetics. You can't really control that too much. That's more of a genetic thing. So, but it's good to know. And the way you would know that if you're an apple or a pear-shaped body is where you gain weight. So if you're gaining weight more in the abdomen area, more than any other place in your body, then that would be apple-shaped. When you gain weight, if you gain it more, not so much in your abdomen, but maybe in your arms and your legs and your thighs, that's more of a pear-shaped body. And you can consider yourself a little lucky because that is the type of body type that has lower risk to disease than the apple-shaped body. Now, I know we've talked about this in class, so we've had this conversation a little bit, but one of the things that I think is so interesting is that there's been this ongoing conversation in nutrition with whether obesity is more connected with nature, like genetics. So basically, if our parents are overweight and our grandparents are overweight, does that mean that I'm going to be overweight? Versus nurture, which is your environment. So is it more of not so much that genetically speaking, people were overweight in my family, or is it more of what we were eating as a family and what we were doing or not doing as a family? And they've found that over the years of research that there is a component to both. So I don't want to, say that one is, more important than the other. However, when you're looking at the whole picture, we've found that environment actually matters more than anything else. So that's actually great news because I've had students over the years that have told me that, oh my gosh, both of my parents are overweight, and it means that I'm overweight, and no, you can actually break that cycle because that we know through research that how the things that you're doing throughout the day, the choices that you're making with food, the choices that you're making with activity, whether you're doing it or not, matters way more than what your genetics says. Now, I don't want to discount genetics because genetics does have again, a piece of the puzzle, but it's a smaller piece of the puzzle than your environment. So that's actually great news when I think about it because you have the control, you have the choice to be healthy. So don't always say that genetics controls your future of health because so much has to do with your environment, which is great. In terms of making choices, this is so key, and you guys are going to be doing this exactly when we get to our diet analysis assignment. The true key is making long-term changes. So you don't want to, when you think about like diets, like crash diets, those are the things that last for a few days and then you're done. after a few days because you can't handle it anymore. Everyone goes back to their old ways. So it's really important when you're making change that you do it over a long period of time. So what I mean by that, and when we do our diet analysis, I will be writing this information probably within your, well, we're not going to hand it in person anymore, but probably within your Canvas account, that we are going to, I'm going to remind you, it's so important to stick to small, easy, acceptable changes over a long period of time. So for example, I think I told you all about my student that I had years ago. I love using this as an example because I think it drives home for everybody. He used to drink 24 cans of soda every single day. And that's how he started off the semester. And I remember he shared it with our class and everybody was like, oh my goodness gracious. And so he made it, a goal to have for himself to decrease that amount of soda. He didn't want to get rid of it altogether in one day because that in his mind was impossible and hard to do because, as you guys know, soda is really addictive. I think he was drinking like Pepsi or Coke or something like that had caffeine in there. So that's the addictive quality. The sugar, the amount of sugar that's in there is highly addictive. So you can't just quit it cold turkey. I know some people can do that. It takes a lot of mental toughness to do that. But most people, when it comes to food change, have a really hard time with that. So doing long term changes and making those small steps over a long period of time is so important. So with the soda example, week 1 you go down to 23 and a half cans. Week 2 you go down to 22 and a half cans. And you're just slowly making those changes over a very long period of time, until you get to a place where you feel good and comfortable, right? And while you're making those changes, you want to feel good and comfortable. It shouldn't be something that you are going through and it's really uncomfortable and it's painful for you. I don't want it to be that way. I want it to be a happy thing where you feel good as you're making those changes. If you start restricting too much and limiting too much, it's not going to be comfortable. So it's going to feel a little uncomfortable. Making those like healthy replacements is really important too. Um, moderating your calories restriction is good too. In terms of losing weight, you don't want to do it too much though. If you go, for women, this is generally speaking, if you go lower than 1,200 calories per day, you can actually go into what they call starvation mode, where your body will slow down its basal metabolism and will use up its energy from your muscle mass versus your fat mass. For men, you don't want to go below 1,500 calories. So it's kind of the same thing. And like I said, your body goes into starvation mode. So you don't want to go too low on your calories. I know we talked about calories in versus calories out. A lot of it also has to do with the foods that you're choosing throughout the day and making sure that you are getting, good high protein, good healthy protein, plant protein like we've talked about last week is important. Having healthy carbohydrates is important. It's funny that the book says low fat because now more recently we're finding out that fat is not bad, and including those healthy fats is really, really important. So keep all of that in mind. There's a couple things too that I want you to also keep in mind. There's a couple different hunger hormones that are involved in this whole process as well. You may have seen something called ghrelin, Grelin. This is a hormone that our brain releases to signal hunger. And this is when we know that we're hungry. There's also something else called leptin, Leptin, and that basically does the opposite. And what happens is those two hormones work in conjunction with each other. And basically it tells us when we're hungry and when we're full. And when those get out of whack, then that's when our body kind of gets messed up with thinking that we're hungry when we're not. And this can happen actually quite easily. It can happen if we start, for example, if we start not sleeping well at night. If we're getting less than the 7 to 8 hours of sleep on average per night, we've noticed through research that our ghrelin increases and the leptin decreases. So basically we're feeling hungry and we're not really hungry. And the reason why the body does that is because we're not getting the energy that we need through our sleep. And so it's trying to get energy other ways through food. So it's interesting how that gets kind of altered, if we're not getting enough sleep. Also, eating the correct type of foods, and what I mean correct, more unprocessed foods, things that are going to feed that healthy microbiome in our gut that we've talked about in class. Remember the good bacteria and bad bacteria. Things like that are really important to, make those choices throughout the day. There are some, the kind of the end of the chapter shows about things that you can do medically when it comes to losing weight. You don't need to jot this one down, but this is just interesting. There's all these different medications that you can buy. This one is called Orlistat or Xenical that you may have seen before. And the brand name is called Ally. And what it does is it basically doesn't let your body absorb fat. So if you've known anyone that has taken this, it's a very interesting process. What happens, because your body is not absorbing fat, you'll see here the bullet point, dietary fat is deposited in the feces with resulting side effects. So what this means, I'm going to give you a little bit more detail because you're wondering what the heck does that mean. You basically can poop in your pants when you are not ready for it. So one of the little things in the directions that comes with this drug is that it says, please make sure that you're taking, an extra pair of pants wherever you go, because there might be a problem with feces coming out of you when you least expect it, type thing. I don't know the exact wording, but it's something along those lines, because your body is not absorbing fat and it just comes right through you. So obviously, people will go to certain lengths to try to lose weight, and this is one of them. It can also have side effects of not being able to absorb fat-soluble vitamins, which are vitamins A, D, E, and K. We'll talk about that when we talk about the vitamin chapter. I think that's next week. So, there's obviously some issues along with this. There's another thing that people have done, and you may know somebody, it's not that uncommon anymore, is to have bariatric surgery. And basically that's a fancy way of saying weight loss surgery. I do want you to be familiar with, in particular, gastric bypass surgery. That is something that I think is important. Gastric bypass surgery has been around for a few years now, many years, I should say. And there's different ways you can do the surgery depending on the surgeon and how they decide to do it. But the gastric bypass typically is done by taking your small intestine and you basically reroute it and you staple it to the top of the stomach. And you also staple the top of the stomach off. So basically your stomach has now been turned into the size of a walnut. That's how they describe it. Your stomach normally holds up to 4 cups of food, and after the surgery, it holds up to 2 tablespoons of food. So think about the difference there. And what it does is it makes people feel full fast, because the stomach is so small and they can't handle any more food. So the only way somebody is able to get approved for gastric bypass surgery is to have a high body mass index. I believe it has to be 40 or above, which is in the morbid obese category. And you've also tried other methods of losing weight. And you also have other health issues like severe type 2 diabetes and all that. That's the only way you'll get approved for getting this surgery. So obviously it has to be a last stitch effort. There's a lot of complications that come along with having gastric bypass surgery. You're not going to be absorbing the same amount of nutrition that you could before, obviously, because your stomach is so tiny and you're not able to even get enough food in there in the first place. You have to go through extensive counseling before and afterward, because typically people who have a body mass index of 40 or higher have other issues going on, usually emotional issues, and it's deep seated. So they have to go through therapy, because once this surgery happens, they can't use food as a coping mechanism anymore. So there's been several situations where people become, severe alcoholics afterwards, because they have, instead of using food, they're using alcohol, to suppress their emotions or whatever is going on. So you have to have intense therapy before or after. This is a very, very serious surgery. The other thing too is you can actually stretch out this little portion of the stomach over a period of time. So if you start having a little bit more food than you're supposed to, but not enough where it's going to come back up, then you will stretch out your stomach over a period of time and you can start gaining back the weight that you lost. So that has happened to people too. So there's a lot of different issues and complications that can come with gastric bypass. Now there's other methods here too that you can see on the slide. This is the normal stomach. You probably have heard of lap band procedures. That's basically not as permanent as the gastric bypass, where you can put a surgically install a little band, a gastric band, and it's tight. So this is kind of like the stomach portion, the small stomach pouch. So it's the same effect as gastric bypass, but it's not as permanent. So that's another method. There's something else called vertical banded gastroplasty. And there's also something else called the sleeve. I actually know somebody personally that has this, gastrectomy. And basically they remove this part of the stomach. And these other procedures, they do not remove. It's just kind of considered to be an unused portion, part of the stomach. So it's interesting, and it just depends on the person, depends on the surgeon and how they want to do that. But typically, the one that you hear about most is gastric bypass. And as you can see, there's so many different risks with having these types of surgeries. Bleeding, blood clots, hernias, severe infection, risk of death as high as 2%. That's kind of high if you're going in for this procedure thinking that you're going to get healthy from it. Gastric bypass is very expensive, $18,000 to $35,000. Gastric banding is also expensive, $17,000 to $30,000. The other thing too that needs to be mentioned is that once you lose all the weight, because you lose it fast when this happens, is your skin has now been stretched out because of the excess weight to begin with. And you may have even seen this on somebody before where they have it looks like hanging skin. And so you need to have another surgery to get rid of that hanging skin. And that also can cause complications as well, risk of infection and all kinds of problems. Another procedure that people have, this is actually considered to be the most common cosmetic procedure here in the United States, lipectomy, or you may have also heard of it as liposuction. Liposuction is basically where you suck fat out from your body, and it's not considered to be a healthy type of weight loss system. It's much better if you can lose weight in a healthy way with your diet and exercise. And the problem with this is that it says it may result in a weight loss of 4 to 8 pounds. But the problem with this is that, say if you go to suck the fat out of your thighs, you are now sucking all the fat cells out, which are now permanently gone. And if you go to gain weight in the future, which usually happens with people, is they will not gain weight in the thigh area where you sucked out the fat cells, because you get fat cells when you're little. When you're born, basically, you have a certain number of fat cells, and they either expand or shrink over time. You don't get any more or lose any. In this procedure, you're actually losing them because you're sucking them out. And you cannot gain them back. You don't create more fat cells. So wherever your fat cells now are in your body, that's where the weight is going to get gained. So people after this procedure have complained that they look lumpy afterwards because now they've sucked out the fat, from these different areas. And it's expensive, and you can have risks of all kinds of complications, just like with any procedure. There's all kinds of popular diets out there, as you guys know: high protein, low carbs, ones that are low fat, ones that are high fat. I've heard of over the years, cabbage soup diet, where you're eating nothing but cabbage soup, all kinds of things. But the thing that works the best is to make those small, easy, acceptable changes over a long period of time and have it be a lifestyle change. This word diet is not one of my favorite words, I have to admit. It looks like the word die. That's not a good thing, first of all. But also, it's a temporary fix. And so you want to choose something that's going to last for a long period of time. All right, so that is chapter 7. I'm going to wrap up now. If you guys, again, have any questions about anything, I'm going to open up the discussion board to ask any questions as a class. I'm going to let you guys try to answer each other's questions, and I will kind of monitor that as time goes on, and I will also, put my 2 cents in. And have a great day, you guys. All right, take care. Bye-bye.